Hello, I'm Dr. Bruce Teague of the EWU Center for Entrepreneurship, and this is Startup Stories, where we explore the entrepreneurial journey with local Spokane area entrepreneurs. On this episode, we will discuss the genesis of one of Spokane's favorite restaurant bakeries, Chaps. I'm joined today by Celeste Shaw, founder of Chaps Bakery. Celeste was one of the early recipients of the EWU Entrepreneurial Difference Maker Award, which is an award that we created specifically to recognize individuals who are making a difference in the lives of Spokane area people through their entrepreneurial efforts. And so that was very special for us to enjoy that with you. She's one of my favorite Spokane area entrepreneurs and has been a longtime friend. So Celeste, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much.
So, and we were just talking a couple of minutes ago off screen that I get approached by people all the time who are thinking about getting into restaurants. They have the dream of starting a restaurant. So where did the inspiration for Chaps come from for you?
Well, surprisingly, I question myself with that all the time because I think as I kind of transcend through this entire restaurant journey, it always presents itself a little bit different for me. However, in the beginning, if I could steal it from Elizabeth Gilbert, I'd really have to say that it's eat, pray, love. And considering where I grew up in a very small rural community in Montana with two amazing grandparents, I really believe that your life story is your leadership story. And that's where it started for me.
So what motivated Chaps as a restaurant? What made you decide? Because that wasn't where your career was at that point.
Right.
So how did you decide? I've got a restaurant bakery in mind. This is what I'm going to do.
Right.
And it's so unique. So where did the vision come from?
Right. And I think that for most people that want to start restaurants, I being one of them, we all are born servers at some level. And there's something that's so satisfying and so sweet about serving another person, serving a community, serving each other. My maternal grandmother, Selma, was an amazing server. Like me, which is amazing because I own a restaurant, I'm not the best cook. But there's something about preparing and serving that I love. And years ago, she died of pancreatic cancer. And when she died, I wasn't ready to let go of what she had created and had really taught me in so many different profound ways. And I think that was serving yourself. And with that became the vision to carry on and represent her going forward. And I have my grandfather's original Chaps that he homesteaded in eastern Montana with, and the name was also born from that.
And so you started with the little house building. So the
Correct.
original house, so we've got the bedroom and all of those different spaces that we recognize. And then you added on to that. But one of my favorite things about going into Chaps, along with the food and everything else, has always been that it still feels like walking into my grandmother's house when I was young. So how did you decide to take a small house and keep that feel? Not change it into something else, but keep that feel of coming into a home as part of what that restaurant has become?
Well, I had looked for a space to create Chaps, and it was just fortuitous that there was this small house available that very much is that mimics the home where I grew up. People thought I was crazy because it was a very dilapidated, no power, no running water location. And we picked the house up and we moved it. And it took us about 4 years to go from start to finish. But I think one of the most remarkable parts of that is that in the beginning, the neighborhood was frustrated with me bringing in this really rundown old building that they thought would kind of ruin or tarnish the look of the neighborhood. And yet, over time, I think they saw my determination and my commitment, and what had transcended then from being frustrated into what can we do to help? People bringing hot chocolate, people bringing brownies, people saying, you've got this, don't stop, you can do it. And so I think it became more of a barn raising, and there was a feeling of some ownership by the neighborhood, which now has lent itself to the familiarity of it, to feeling like it's their own home. I've seen people's kids, including yours, go from being teeny tiny to where I'm ready to hire them to work. And so I think a lot of the ambiance really comes from having some ownership of that personal space.
So I want to back up a step here in just a second and talk about some of the basics of starting a restaurant, just the process of actually creating a business that is a restaurant. But you just touched on something that I think is kind of general to entrepreneurs, and that in every entrepreneurial story, there is that resistance, that challenge, the times when you don't think this business is going to make it, that you've got to push on. And you were just talking about resistance and reluctance of the neighborhood. When you move this old house and stick it down and start transforming it, can you talk a little bit about how you engaged with people? Because one reaction could have been to become defensive or angry. How did you engage with them and win them over to the idea that this vision is going to add to this community?
That's a good question. I think the answer is this. I think people already want that. I think they're looking for that. And I think one of the most remarkable characteristics about being an entrepreneur is that when we see the vision, nothing really stands in the way of that vision, even when we all know we're going to fall down and there's going to be, progress, there's going to be some failure, you're going to be imperfect, you're going to make mistakes. But I think what happens with that is you start to represent what other people are afraid of. And when you start to let people see that vulnerability in you and that your sight is just set on getting there, they start to champion you through it because they want to believe in good and they want to believe in our ability to overcome. And I think clearly they saw that with the beginning of Chaps because we went through all kinds of adversity. We went through all kinds of legal issues. I was constantly falling down and dusting myself off. I would sit and cry on the property, and strangers would pull up and say, "What can we do? How can we help?" And so I don't think we had to win them over. I think what happens with entrepreneurs is they just start to present a solution to someone else's inability to see that kind of joy and to see that we really believe in the fact we can achieve that vision.
Wow, that's certainly a powerful statement and resonates, I think, with a lot of entrepreneurial stories. A lot of people, like I said, aspire to restaurant entrepreneurship. So can you pull back the veil a little bit and talk about some of the practicalities? Because restaurants, for instance, are low margin, managing costs, things like that. How did you already know the business side of restaurants, or was that a learning process? How did you come to the business side of this?
I think that's probably the most powerful part of my story as an entrepreneur, because I wasn't even a waitress in high school or growing up. The closest I got to really serving big groups of people was at branding once a year. And I think ultimately, it became my greatest advantage to be naive to the entire process. Like most entrepreneurs, we don't know a lot of the business side because we see this joyous, glowing end result of knowing we're going to get to the end of that dream. And so learning the business side was very difficult for me. But again, I didn't know how to do it from anybody else. I didn't learn how another restaurant did it. I didn't have business classes in business management. So I only could create what I knew. And now I've created Chaps to be a completely different model than anyone else really was familiar with, probably in Spokane. Right. And I think it's opened some doors for other people to use that model a little bit. But I appreciated the naivety of it. One of the segues that I would say from that is that entrepreneurs, or if you're thinking about going into the restaurant business or a serving business, is to never negotiate your own standard in the sense of not doing it your own way. Everybody has the gift of creating something new, a new style, a new look, a new color, how we're serving differently. If you take someone else's recipe and put it into your own vision, it won't work. And so there is really power in the fact that if that's how you see it, you remain non-negotiable with maintaining that. And moving forward for me, I think with some of the structure that I needed to relearn, it was being naive and not knowing it and being able to still persevere with how I saw it or how I saw it needed to be.
You know, you just said something that I think is really important too, because a lot of times, so you can have people that go into truly innovative, brand new businesses. This has never existed before. But for a lot of aspiring entrepreneurs, they're going into businesses where it has existed before, restaurants, coffee shops, etc. And I think that one of the temptations can be to accept the pressure to be like everybody else that's succeeded, but you really can't lead by following. You become a lesser version of what they are good at already. And so you really do have to embrace that positive difference if you want to stand out. So I think that's really powerful.
There's no question. I think one of the most extraordinary lessons that I've learned, building off of what you're saying, is some of the best lessons and experiences I have would be from failure. But I think that failure is such a harsh position to be in because it's hard to dig yourself out of feeling like you failed. I think once you recognize that no one or nothing is going to get in the way of stopping you from this vision, is that you don't need to use the word failed. I think that entrepreneurs have a way of eclipsing that word into calling it something like, I've reinvented this. That was a learning experience. This is where I've come from this. This is what that taught me. So you really didn't fail. What you've done is you've allowed yourself to be vulnerable enough to accept something new and then build on that to make it better. So that, again, on the business end of it, whatever is your weakest, you as an entrepreneur need to decide you are going to make that your strongest. You become the expert of that. You become the expert of understanding math and accounting. Become the expert of knowing the legal system. Understand the health department. Know what it takes to fire somebody. Whatever you felt may be the most weak perspective for you in all these different arenas of the business side. Educate yourself, listen to others, teach yourself, keep yourself open, keep yourself vulnerable, and then learn from that. You didn't really fail. You've recognized that you have an opportunity to grow.
That's a fantastic lesson. One last thing that I wanted to get into with you, because I think it's so important as a lesson that can be taken away from your experience at Chaps. But one of the things that's always stood out to me is the way that the work culture and ambiance blend together with the food to create the experience at Chaps. And it's something that you created very early on. You have always had the nicest employees. It's always been, no matter who we're engaged with when we walk in there, they have always been genuinely nice people. Can you talk a little bit about how you established that culture on the front end and how you find those people? Because I think it's one of the challenges that particularly small business entrepreneurs, run into, and yet it makes so much difference. So how did you succeed at that?
Yeah, I have a whole different way of interviewing and taking applications in. I appreciate a good resume, but I always start with the idea that it's important to hire for character, and then you teach skill. Because even though you're bringing me a lot of knowledge and you may have a lot of experience, I can't always teach you to be a better person or a better human being or how to work with a team or how to be compassionate to someone that walks in the door. So I always start with the idea that you hire for character and teach skill. I think the other thing that's become really vital in my restaurant and maybe other small businesses is the owner is present. And like you know, because you see me, I am there every day. I am 100%. There is nothing that I won't do that my staff does. Washing dishes, cleaning bathrooms, mowing lawn, serving dishes, cooking. I want to be present at whatever level that is, because I believe that if we lean into it, we also have the perspective of what our staff goes through. And I'm very protective of my staff. I don't believe that the customer is always right. I believe that right is right. And if you are rude or cruel to my crew, I'm going to ask you to apologize. I stand by the fact that I'll never need to sell a pancake bad enough that you're allowed to humiliate or intimidate anybody else in my business. And I think most people that come to Chaps already know that and recognize that about me. I think that a leader is someone who really takes responsibility in finding people and process. And then you have this specific kind of courage that's there to develop it into something better or mold it into something more. And once that you've inserted yourself into recognizing those things, I think you really grow together as a really remarkable team.
I certainly think that it's powerful when people can come into a workspace where they feel safe to do their job and to occasionally make mistakes, and to know that that the boss or the owner in this case is going to support them through that, and is going to watch out for them too. I do think that is powerfully meaningful. So, but you do have wonderful employees, and that's a big part of the experience.
Amazing staff.
So, for people who haven't had the chance to experience Chaps themselves, how do they find you? How can they come down and experience it?
Sure. I mean, we, like most businesses now, have social media presence where you can follow along with where we are and what we do. Instagram is there. We have a website, chapsgirl.com. You can find us on Facebook. You can always call the restaurant. We're open. Of course, COVID has presented as, its own set of problems, being open and closing a little bit different as we navigate ahead. But for now, Wednesday through Sunday from 8 a.m. to 2 p.m., we're open.
Okay, fantastic. By the way, you have some of my favorite Instagram photos. I love the pictures that you put up. So it's fun to follow.
Thank you.
Unfortunately, that's all the time that we have today. But Celeste, thank you so much for joining me on Startup Stories and for sharing the startup story of Chaps.
Thank you. I feel completely privileged to be part of the community.
Well, we're certainly thankful that you are, because you're one of my favorite people in the community. I love what you do.
Thank
you. It goes so far beyond what we've had a chance to discuss today, but certainly the Chaps story, I think, will have a lot of meaning to people and a lot of great lessons today. Thank you.
Thank you, Bruce.
Need replacement windows? Call 1-800-NEXT-WINDOW. Window World. Simply the best for less.
You're listening to the music of 68-year-old Spokane singer-songwriter Tim Brummel.
I was 10 years old when I wrote my first song.
Tim's new 5-song EP is available on iTunes, Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music, and many more sites.
They were dancing and smiling.
Tim and his music is a success story for Spokane, and we want Spokane to hear hometown boy Tim's music.
At the table, as if the sun